Hello and welcome to the 5 Yard Rush Daily Fantasy Sports Show. I'm Mark Ferguson, and as ever, we are here talking all things NFL and FanTeam. And who else would I be doing that with other than Nick Owen at Nick of Wigan? How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing all right, Mark. Yeah, doing okay. Just back to the old school this week. Just back to
Yeah.
me and you. No guest. Hopefully, we'll have someone on next week. It was just a little bit short notice this week, wasn't it? But no, I'm all good,
Yeah,
Mark.
indeed, good. And how was your week 12?
Um, Small cash week 12. The small cash came in the red zone contest. I had one team I think that cashed. I didn't have anything in the fumble, which is usually my staple contest. But I did have a little bit cash in the red zone. So that was it. I probably just about broke even, if not just slightly under for the weekend. So it wasn't all bad. But yeah, the season long, I've took a bit of a hit in that, very disappointingly. I'm sure we'll come on to that.
Yeah, I think I had a similar week. I had a decent little cash in the red zone main contest, which is the first one for a couple of weeks. And in the season long, I had one of my teams dropped about 100 spaces. My second team dropped about 100 spaces, which was very disappointing. My first team had CD Lamb in it, but it still stayed in the top 100. So that was, I feel like, very frustrating. But there you go. But yeah,
I didn't do too bad in the Seahawks and Washington. I actually only entered one line in it, but the one line came 36th out of 298, and only for selecting the wrong captain. I captain McLaurin. Had I have gone McKissick or Gibson, it probably puts me up into, I would say, the top 3 spaces minimum. So that's a shame, but never mind.
never mind. And then are you playing tonight in the who we got here? Is it Dallas Seahawks, isn't it? No, Dallas
Yeah,
Saints. Sorry, Saints.
it's Dallas Saints. Yeah, I
Yeah.
probably will have a little go. It's one of them. This one tonight. I've not had a look at building any lineups just yet because I've actually only finished work 15 minutes ago, as you know, Mark. Thanks to that Barclays. But yeah, it's just one of them. I think for me, it doesn't really feel like an open game. This one tonight, I'm fully expecting Dallas to come away with the win. I think Saints has been a bit porous in recent weeks. I think to get a little bit differential in this, you're looking at like Captain Schultz, Captain Dallas D, maybe to get a bit different. Captain Pollard, that's Tony, not Eric. So yeah, I
Still don't
mean,
know.
I can't believe you don't know who Eric Pollard is. That said, up until a few weeks ago, you didn't know what a Big Mac was. So, in fairness, yeah, I give you benefit of the doubt there. But yeah, I
It
might
sounds
have a
like
couple.
I've been sort of cryogenically frozen
Yeah,
for the last 30
sometimes I
years.
think that. To be fair, sometimes I do think like it's just like these things just passed you by, or I don't know. But yeah, I'll probably have a couple of goals on it. I've not had a go at building a lineup just yet, but I suspect the Dallas assets will all be fairly pricey versus the Saints ones.
I was a bit I've seen people saying they're struggling to make a lineup they're happy with tonight, and rather worryingly, especially as I'm generally pretty awful at showdown, my lineup just it seemed obvious to me.
All right.
My main lineup, as it were. So I'm not going to bother entering anymore because I'm just thinking it seems to me like an obvious lineup, but that's worrying.
So do
So there
you
you go.
feel what you feel it was quite easy to make the lineup then?
Yeah,
Do you?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. For me,
interesting.
it was. For me, it
Well,
was.
I have actually just thrown a little lineup together whilst we've just been talking, and I don't hate it. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. But it does cover Zeke, Lamb, Pollard, Schultz, Dallas, D, and Taysom Hill. And there's a little bit of flexibility, I think, on the captain there as well. So I might just throw something like that in and just not think about it too much. I think it's one of them contests where I think it's either going to be a high scorer and Dallas D doesn't turn up, or Dallas will just end up running away with it. So we'll see.
I can't see anything other than Dallas domination. To be
No,
perfectly
me
honest,
neither. To be fair, especially
I
without the
really,
Saints
really
been
can't.
playing. There's just
Yeah,
nothing on the field for the Saints at the moment.
yeah. It's actually with Kamara being ruled out again as well.
Yeah,
Ingram just come back from injury, etc.
but Taysom Hill is a touchdown hawk, and if he gets anywhere near that goal line, then I think even though he's 15.9, I probably don't like playing him as much when he's actually starting at quarterback. I think he's more of a threat in the game when he comes in as a gadget player. So yeah, that would be the only one I'd probably change. But then I don't know who I'd put in because I don't really like Ingram or any of the Saints receivers. So
No, it's yeah. I think Ingram was the only, to have a Saint in, because you have to have a Saint, don't you? You can't
you
play
have
six
to
or
have
so.
one.
Yeah. I think it was Ingram for me. The price he was and stuff. If they can do anything, it's going to go through him. So yeah, not expecting much of them, but yeah. Okay, great. So probably should get on with the scheduled show tonight. So tonight we'll be talking about our season-long teams, and it'll be nice to catch up on those because we haven't actually looked at those properly for a couple of weeks, really. Because last week with Thanksgiving, we recorded after the lock, so it wasn't much point talking about that for too long. Then we're going to create a lineup together for this week's Sunday Redzone contest, which has all the 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. games together, so that's a total of 11. And there's another whopping €7,500 guarantee prize pool in the main contest, which has a €12 buy-in, and the €2 contest has a €2,500 guarantee prize pool, which is still worthwhile. So yeah, we'll be talking about that. But before we do, I just want to briefly, as we've got a little bit of a less of a sort of tightly packed agenda tonight, just want to briefly mention Dream Sport. That's the sister site of FanTeam. You can play there for free. And they've reintroduced their own Super Sunday Redzone contest where there's actually €50 worth of FanTeam tickets as prizes. So top 10 win tickets for the following Sunday's FanTeam Redzone contest. I think it's usually 3 for the €12 and then the other 7 for the €2. And it's completely free to play on Dream Sport. And I would recommend it if you haven't done it yet, because I always try it. And yeah, I enjoy it.
And it's exactly the same, isn't it? All the pricing's the same. So if you're already playing on FanTeam, it's very easy to just go. Unfortunately, you can't export your lineup there, but what you can do is just build exactly the same lineup because all the pricing's the same. The contest scoring is the same. So definitely worth it, Mark, as you say, especially when there's these kind of incentives where you can enter something absolutely free of charge with Dream Sports own currency and win a ticket to go and actually win the cash prize on FanTeam. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. I've won a couple of tickets on it, I think, this season. I came 11th the other week, which was really frustrating. And then last week I was like a third or fourth at some point in it, but again, I dropped down as I always do.
You'd almost rather come dead last than 11th, wouldn't you, in something like that?
Completely.
Yeah.
I got myself on the waiting list if nobody claimed their tickets, but it never happened.
The good thing about that as well is you tend to find, I think, Mark, that the Dream Sport contests, because it's a little bit lesser known than FanTeam, they're not as you're not up against as many people basically. So you've got a better chance of winning on Dream Sport than you have on FanTeam as long as your lineup is up to it.
Yeah, completely. That's kind of what that's one of the reasons that I was sort of attracted to it as well. And also they do season-long contests as well. I don't know if they're going to do a second chance one like FanTeam is for the Premier League, but they do have all the other ones. So anyway, I would definitely recommend dropping over there to dreamsport.com and check it out and win some prizes. So shall we dare to depress ourselves and look at our season-long teams?
If we must.
Are you going first?
Yeah, fine. I will. I was just going to say happily go first, but I don't think happily is the right word at all. So the state of play with my season long, as you can see across the board, it was a very, very disappointing week last week, to say the least. Jonathan Taylor, the bright spark, with a double figure performance. I think everyone else just had too much turkey. So yeah, pretty poor mark. And it's left me in a bit of a position this week where, because of some of the matchups, and because I don't like the looks and the workload that some of these players are getting, I've actually ended up making 3 transfers this week and took a -8 again. This pod team of mine has dropped to 688, so I have dropped off a cliff because about
Wow.
2 or 3 weeks ago I was in the 200s.
Mm.
That shows how quick in this season long you can turn it round, either in your advantage or obviously not in this case. I've got a couple of teams that are mingling around the 400s and a couple around the 500s, but I've got a lot of similar players across the board now with all those teams. So when there's only subtle changes and subtle differences, so when they've taken a hit, they've all sort of taken a hit. But the pod team's now my second worst performing team, so I really needed to change things up this week. And the issues I had is obviously Swift is he's already confirmed as being out. Lamar Jackson went on a bit of a spell of scoring quite well, and then since I've owned him, he's done absolutely nothing to justify bringing him in. I feel like Josh Allen was the same when I had him. Sort of it was between, I think, game week maybe 5 and 10. I had Allen at some point during that spell, and he had a few quiet weeks or underperforming weeks. I took him out and he absolutely flew, and I'm sure Lamar Jackson will probably do the same this week because he's coming up against Pittsburgh, and they're not a bad team to run on Pittsburgh. You can do it. Joe Mixon showed us that last week, and he is RB1 in Baltimore, but I don't like what I'm seeing from Jackson. He's too Jekyll and Hyde at the moment, so he was on the chopping board for me as well. As was Mike Evans. When Mike Evans is Mike Evans, he is top 10, top 5 scoring wide receiver, dominant, catches everything you throw at him, couple of touchdowns in the end zone. You get a big score from him when he's Mike Evans, but when he isn't Mike Evans, you might as well be playing Lee Evans. Like, it's just dreadful. I can't. He's too inconsistent. He's far, far too inconsistent. 4.6 last week when Antonio Brown wasn't there. I know Godwin was and Gronk and, Fournette had a good game, but it's too many mouths, I think, in Tampa Bay. I just don't like it. It's just not reliable points. So he's another one that I've had to sacrifice this week as well. So 3 changes, Mark. And while I am on a roll with my season long, I might as well show you the changes. So the changes that I'm ringing this week are Kirk Cousins, who I think has flown largely under the radar this season, as his ownership shows there, 1%. But
I was amazed about that when I saw that earlier. 1%.
Yeah, crazy. And he's not he's not like a top scoring quarterback when you actually look at like the list of who's scored the points. He's not like a top 3 or top 4, but he's still on 217 points for the season. It still puts him above the likes of Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Carson Wentz, who's been on a tear recently, Kyler Murray, who's missed some games. But steady Eddie, I feel like you're getting per week out of Kirk Cousins, you're getting sort of like 15, 20 points guaranteed, and I'll take that. I'll take that every day of the week. And it's he had a really good season last year as well, Kirk Cousins. I remember actually being on Rich's pod in the off-season, Dynasty Island, and he actually asked who would be a good sort of like buy low, win now kind of player. And I said Kirk Cousins because he had a really good season last year, his best season of his career, and he's having another good season this year. Naturally, bringing him in meant that to try and maximize points there, I did want a stack, and Justin Jefferson of late has just been phenomenal. I think you can play him against absolutely anybody, and he's guaranteed work, he's guaranteed targets. So he comes in, and I think his price may have snuck up a little bit in the price changes. I could be wrong there, but I just wanted to get him in before that. The third move was to bring in Joe Mixon, who again recently has been absolutely tearing up trees. He's had, I think it's now 5 back-to-back weeks of, it's 4 back-to-back weeks even of 25 points or above kind of scoring, and that's an unbelievable level of scoring. And when you look at his games to finish the season, there's some teams there where he can really score points again. Chargers, Ravens, the 49ers. I think there's some defenses there where, I think we said this last week anyway, that Mixon is almost matchup proof at this point because he's so involved in the offense. You can play him regardless of the matchup. I think the only thing that's held him back in his career is his health so far. I think he's got a better offensive line in front of him this year. There's better weapons throughout the offense. So there's not as many men in the box, and you're seeing the best of Joe Mixon. So those are the 3 moves I've made, Mark. Ideally, I probably would have wanted Harris out this week or maybe Gesicki, but the other moves felt more pressing. I'll give Gesicki another week, and we'll see what happens with Harris this week against the Ravens. But yeah, it's something needs to happen because 688 is obviously a million miles away from the cash spaces, but there's still time left yet. I'm not going to throw the towel in just yet because I've seen that in the space of 3 weeks, I've dropped 400 positions in this season long. So, what week are we on now? 13. I've got 6 weeks essentially to pull this back, which it's doable. I can still get this team into the cash spaces. The only thing that worries me now is some of the ownerships on certain players will start getting very similar down the stretch. But yeah, that's me this week, Mark.
You've you should have good to worry about ownership because you got Kirk Cousins, so
yeah,
you should be okay. You should be okay. Funnily enough, I've got Gesicki and Harris in my teams, my season, my pod team as well, and I've taken a slightly different route to you. So I've actually ended up, although it doesn't show on there, I've actually had to do 4 transfers this week. So I've had to take a minus 16. Basically, this was just a really stupid admin thing. And in fact, I didn't scroll down far enough to realize that my defense was on a bye this week until after I'd done my transfers. And then I'm thinking, because I've got to catch up, I think I could just left it and taken the 0. Then I was thinking I need to catch up because this team's 479th at the moment. So I need to do some catching up. So I took a bit of a gamble by just putting in Chicago because they're the sort of high scoring of those cheap ones. Like you wanted to, I actually did it. I took Harris out. 5-yard rush Murph has been saying for a couple of weeks that Harris is on the decline. And I think I wanted to jump ahead of that a bit, and I've replaced. And I also had Swift as well, which again I didn't flag that till after I'd done my other transfers. So in theory, if I'd have just been a bit more observant, I probably could have. I'd still need to do one because I had Deebo Samuel, so I'd always have to change 3 people. So yeah, so I replaced him with Deontay Johnson, who's in because he's very low owned for what he does. He's only 3% at the moment. And Antonio Gibson, who's 1%, and then I put Jonathan Taylor, he's 50%, but I'm not worried about that because he's just a good play. And so Gibson and Johnson both were picked because their percentages of ownership really, because they've got to catch up. There's no point picking players which are highly owned. And so I think Gibson has obviously shown in the last couple of weeks that he's a lot more involved, and even McKissick could be out this week, so then he'll be almost completely game script proof. Deontay Johnson is really consistent and almost flies under the radar a little bit. And because Big Ben gets so much bad press, I don't think people are quite realizing how well he's doing fantasy-wise, Johnson. So, he was picking up, he was getting reception after reception when he shouldn't even been on the field last week. So in some respect, he's almost game script proof. If he's going to be playing in a blowout in the fourth quarter.
He's so heavily targeted, Deontay Johnson. That's the thing he really sees the looks, and I think the Big Ben bad press mark is one, and I think people assume because Chase Claypool is there and because Juju was there prior to injury and Pat Frymouth is there and James Washington bobs in and out and Najee Harris takes targets out of the backfield. I think people just assume that it's because it's a crowded offense on paper that I think that's why he does fly under the radar. But when you actually look at his workload, he's so heavily targeted.
Yeah, and he's just consistent, isn't he? So, thankfully, CD Lamb is fit and healthy for tonight. So that's a bit of a bonus because, and I've still got Evans in there as well, who probably will be coming out next week because he's just too inconsistent, as you said, from week to week.
Yeah.
Although
looks like Tarzan plays like Jane.
is that you're going to be on your bio, your Twitter bio? Yeah, so that's me 479. So a bit to catching up to do, but like say 6 weeks to catch up 200 spaces to get in the money. I think that team's. I don't think you're realistically going to catch up with the top 100. I don't think. Actually, I don't really know about it. I'm just thinking about that now. I'm not actually too sure. I think it'd be quite hard to get to top 100 from there, though. But I think, if you're behind, you just need to start playing these lower owned players to try and catch up.
Yeah, I think that in essence, that is the only way you're going to get different now, and hope that some of the higher owned players do have bad weeks and you can capitalize on them. Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, you have. I'm a prime example that you can really yo-yo though in this season long, but it's getting harder and harder now because I think people are gravitating to certain players. There was a spell where Jonathan Taylor wasn't that highly owned, whereas now a massive percentage of the game will have him. It's almost like having Mo Salah in FPL. You're just having him because most other people have got him, and you don't want to miss out. So yeah, it's getting to that point in the season where it's difficult. But do you know what, Mac? I've really enjoyed the season long this year. It's been a good learning curve, and transfer management is definitely one thing I'll take forward to next year because I think you just mentioned about missing out that your D was on a buy, and I think the other week I burned a transfer on my D because I was like, oh well, I've got the transfer there. I've no bye weeks the week after, so I might as well use it. And literally like an hour or so later, one of the players I had was ruled out, and it's straight away it's like it was -8. Which like you took a -16 this week, and I think -16 you think, oh god, that's harsh, but across if you're making 4 transfers, -16 is only -4 per player. So if you can get 15-20 points per player you've brought in, which is optimistic, but we've seen it happen. You've paid for your hit there, definitely.
Yeah. So the other thing is probably worth talking about was the final price changes happened this week as well. So this is a learning curve, which hopefully will, FanTeam will keep the same sort of changes going next year and stuff. So again, 3 million was the biggest change you could get. There's quite a few players who had £3 million. I didn't because I had used up wildcards on every team but my bottom team, and I didn't really want to change that drastically. I actually didn't bother doing any transfers before the price changes, because at the moment, this part of the season, I think it was more important to know who's healthy than use up a transfer. Because I think if you use up a transfer to say gain a few million, but then you're going to end up having, you could have ended up having to do more transfers because of injured players and stuff. So
yeah,
I think
And the ones that rose, I don't think would come as a surprise, really. Like Cordell Patterson has shot up from 10 million to 13 to 16.
Yeah.
At 16 million, I don't think he's in any of my lineups now because I took him out, I think, the week the Falcons had the bye or he had an injury. And I've just not brought him back since. There might be one team that has him in, but I've just not really got much of an interest there at 16 million now, as much as he's quite productive week to week. I think 16 million is better spent elsewhere. Actually, I think you can get better, more reliable players elsewhere.
I thought he looked quite good actually last week. Actually, the old eye test again, which is never failed us. He before the bye, before he was off and stuff, before he was out injured and stuff, he looked slow and cumbersome, I thought. I think I mentioned that on one of the pods here, whereas he looked fast and powerful again. So I wanted to bring him in at 13, knowing the price changes were coming, but I just couldn't do it. I erred on the side of caution and just waited to see what happened in terms of injuries this week.
Yeah.
So I think so that's the final price changes done now. So that'll be so now until the end of the season. Now you're not going to be affected by that. As we say, if you're trying to catch up, look at the ownerships. Is when you bring in the player in, you'll see the ownership before you actually have to transfer them in. So you take them in and out, you can see the ownerships. And I think it's worth just looking at those and just bearing in mind, you're trying to catch up, so you have to beat the field. But I also think, even if you're catching up, there'll still be players who are doing this who will their interest will still tail off over the next 6 weeks. So just by being interested, you can almost move up automatically, I think.
Yeah.
So that's the season uncovered. So before we go and build our lineups, Nick, listeners and watchers of the show are always asking us about personal grooming questions. What advice can you give them?
Do you know what? I actually saw an advert for this the other day on TV, and I was like, "Wow! I advertise that every single week, free of charge. Might I add, free of charge."
Yeah, we need to have a word about that.
Yeah, but no, the advert really makes it look. I mean, it's a great tool anyway, but the advert, I'm clearly not doing it any justice.
You're going to buy another?
Yeah, well, maybe. But as seen on TV, the Lawnmower 4.0, so support for 5-yard rush podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in below the waist men's grooming. Recently launched their 4th generation trimmer, as you can see on the screen for those that are live or watching the video back. The Lawnmower 4.0 all across Europe. It is offering you a precision engineered tool for your family jewels, as we say every single week, Mark. Lots of great features. If you want to know what they are, I won't list them for you. I would say just go and find the advert or even go on the website and look it up yourself. But no, there's some really good features there. And actually, some of the other products that they offer as well, which was on the advert the other day, Mark, they look pretty good as well. I think they've got something called the Weed Whacker. Which is I think that's a nose trimmer actually, the Weed Whacker. But no one likes a hairy nose, do they? So get yourself over to Manscaped. That is what I'm trying to say, top and bottom of it. Join 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer we have for you: 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code 5yard, and that's at manscaped.com. So when you get to the checkout, promo code 5yard, and that's manscaped.com. Get yourself over there. Get yourself a trimmer, whether it is the Lawnmower 4.0 or whether it is something else that tickles your fancy. The Weed Whacker, maybe.
I think I never know when we start those bits, I never know where you're going to go with them, Nick. And secondly, I also feel like we've been doing them so long now that maybe there should be a Lawnmower 5.0.
Yeah. Probably not far away, is it? It can't be far away.
What, Ultra HD or something like that? So shall we do the start the main event and build ourselves a lineup for this week's Red Zone? Yeah, Red Zone, Sunday Redzone. Sorry, I'm trying to do too many things at once.
I was wondering where you're going with that.
Just
Sunday Redzone.
I'm trying to do too many things at once. Let's have a look. Here we go. NFL Week 13, Sunday Redzone. Let's build ourselves a lineup. Okay. So yeah, we can see all that. It's all good. Yep, great. So let's start off with quarterback. So Kyler Murray's back and he's goes straight in as the most expensive quarterback. And then Lamar Jackson, who you've already talked about being disappointing a little bit. And Tom Brady's also been a tad disappointing. And Matthew Stafford is also been a tad disappointing, I would say. And Jalen Hurts has also been. So there's lots. What I'm trying to say is there's lots of questions at the top here. There is a lot of disappointment. Well, I don't think I've said anything factually incorrect there, have I?
No, I have to agree with most of that.
Yeah, exactly. And funnily enough, the people who haven't been disappointing sort of start down here with the Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrows and Carson Wentz, who've been pretty good recently. So who are you interested in here, first of all, Nick?
I actually had a list of obvious picks this week, and despite them being disappointing, the ones that were the obvious picks were exactly the ones you've just said, Matt. So Tom Brady, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Matthew Stafford. I
Wow.
think they're just obvious because of the matchups. Really, the Rams have lost 3 straight. I can't see that being 4, and I think Matt Stafford puts in a performance this week against the lowly Jags. Tom Brady's coming up against the Falcons. We don't really need to say much more there. Lamar Jackson, I mentioned when we were talking about the season longs that the Steelers' run D is absolutely dreadful of late. He is a running back primarily, a quarterback secondly, it seems. So, if people do want to spend up 21.3 and get Lamar Jackson in, despite his recent performances, I don't hate it this week against Pittsburgh. I think they'll turn up there. Jalen Hurts against the Jets again. There's only one team that's worse than the Steelers against running backs, and that is the New York Jets. So I don't hate playing Jalen Hurts this week because he is a running quarterback as well. So there's obvious picks there. Kirk Cousins I do like as well. That said, I think the Lions. I think that they're a sneaky good team against passing. The Lions. I think I've seen it firsthand this season. They gave us some difficulty when we played them, but I think with Kirk Cousins, I think he's got to that point now where, because of what is within that offense, weapons wise, I think you can just play Kirk Cousins against almost anyone, and he's going to give you at worst a shootout, and you're quite happy with a shootout in fantasy because it means you're going to score lots of points. But the budget option I like this week, Mike, was actually Tyler Heineke. A couple of reasons why. Raiders have given up 9 touchdowns in the last 5 weeks to quarterbacks, and 20 on the season to quarterbacks, 5th most conceded in the last 5 weeks versus quarterbacks. So I think when you look at the turnovers that the Raiders D get as well, they're quite a good D on pressure and fumble recoveries, but they're not a big intercepting D, which seems to have been a bit of an Achilles heel of Tyler Heineke. I think he's had 10 interceptions on the season, 16 touchdowns. But they don't have a lot of turnovers through the air. And what I like, if you're going to play Tyler Heineke, I think it's a cheap stack with a Terry McLaurin, who we've said previously is matchup proof, play him against anyone. Maybe even throw in a Logan Thomas in there who's back this week as well. So that's probably the cheap one that caught my eye. There's a few others down there as well. I think you could actually play Derek Carr in that game, and have another nice cheap stack there. The Seahawks always seem to have the Niners number. So Russell Wilson, you probably any other season you would not get Russell Wilson priced at like the 9th or 10th quarterback on the list. Usually he's around sort of top 5 or 6, but he has been disappointing of late, as have the Seahawks. But I think he'll probably be fairly low owned, I reckon, this week against the Niners, because they are a hot team at the moment. The defense has woken up. They've got some bodies back. I think he'd be a nice low-owned player, but like I said, the Seahawks just seem to have the Niners number. It's weird, the NFC West. The Niners beat the Rams beat the Seahawks beat the Niners, and the Cards beat everyone. It's just a bit of a strange division this year.
Yeah. So regarding your the one of the guys are called disappointing, they're all in really good matchups, and you alluded to that completely. They're really in get right matchups. I feel like a lot of quarterbacks are in get right matchups this week. I really like Carson Wentz for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
One, he's just playing the Texans, and also I think he'd be a good if you played him without or even with Taylor. I just think it gives you a bit of leverage as well. I think Taylor will obviously be popular going against that. Funny you say about Heineke. Actually, when we talk about running backs, I'm actually more interested in Gibson and Heineke, but I'll explain why when we get to that. But I think there's probably quite a lot of fantasy goodness sort of hidden in that game, the Raiders and Washington game. I still think, actually, funnily enough, I think I'd rather play Garoppolo over Wilson, which sounds crazy. I'm not really a massive fan of either of them, but I think I'd probably play Garoppolo just because he's a bit cheaper. He's 1.5 million cheaper. The Seahawks are terrible at the moment, absolutely lost their way completely. I can make a case for playing Tua as well. He's got some amazing completion rate over the last couple of games and stuff.
Yeah,
And
Tua is another one that had actually caught my eye as well, Mark. But when I looked into it a little bit deeper, the Giants' D isn't. The Giants are bad. I don't think the D is awful. I think the offense makes the D look worse than it is. But they're actually not bad in terms of like turnovers and like points given up to position like quarterback. But I think their season's over. So I don't hate that.
I feel, though, that as the season goes on, that the matchup of the opposing defense is almost becoming less important. And I think we've seen that as well the last few, especially in the run game. For example, Jonathan Taylor destroyed the best run defense. Fournette destroyed the top run. And there was another one as well the week before or something like that, where whoever was the top run defense at the time got destroyed on the ground. I can't remember who it was. It's been like 3 cases of it. And for example, the Patriots, we were told, had this terrible against receivers. Yet over the last 4 games, if you combine all of the receiver points each game against them, fantasy points, it's an average of only 11, which is just crazy, ridiculously small. So I feel like the matchups aren't so important as possibly they were in the middle of the season. And I think that's partly because teams don't stay the same as the season goes on. Injuries happen. Coordinators have more film to analyze. They can find weaknesses easily. They've just got bigger sample sizes to look at and stuff. And I just feel it's becoming less and less important, the defensive matchup, than the offensive usage. So we'll see. I mean, it's just something that's been I've been thinking the last few weeks, and I think you can, with the quarterback positions, I think it matters because they've all got. It appears like all of our favourites have got good matchups, as in all the good fantasy players. But we've got to pick one. So we've named about 12. So we've got to pick one. And I feel like we've picked Cousins or Burrow every week. So I don't. So
yeah, I think we've had Cousins and Burrow almost every week, haven't we? I think we maybe go a little bit different this week.
Yeah, I'm thinking either Hurts or Wentz to go a bit different, but or we could go cheap with Heineke.
I'm to be fair, I'm happy with the Wentz pick, Mark, because I did like the look of Wentz as well, and I think that statistically it might not look like an amazing matchup. I think they're just a middling defense against the position, the Texans. But I think, again, like you said, I don't think it matters too much at this stage in the season when you're actually looking at the numbers behind it, because I think game script and the position that teams are in is completely different and has a big factor in the outcomes of games as well. So yeah, I'm quite happy with Wentz, and I think there's definitely a nice stack to be had in the receiver position there.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll come on to.
Completely, and also I think it's good leverage off Jonathan Taylor if we don't end up picking him as well. So talking of which, Jonathan Taylor is the most expensive running back this week at 22.5 million. Yeah, exactly. It's probably because he scores a lot more points than everybody else. And then there's a bit of a drop to Austin Eckler, who again feels a little bit like an unsung hero, forgotten man, doesn't he? At 20 million. Then we've got the informed Joe Mixon, who I suspect is going to be very highly owned. Leonard Fournette coming off his 4-touchdown game. Mattison replacing Dalvin Cook, and then an injured DeAndre Swift, and then Najee Harris, who were both pretty low on this week. So they're the headline acts. Who catches your eye?
Well, like you said, Mark Mixon. I like Mixon. The downside is he's gonna be highly owned this week because he's had 4 monster weeks, and this week you would assume will be no different when you look at his matchup, given that the Chargers have given up the 5th most points to running backs in the last 5 weeks, and they've given up 15 touchdowns all season, which just to the running back position, there's only the Jets and the Lions that have given up more. So he's coming up against a defense that is not good against his position. However, if you are looking to get a little bit different and go against what the crowd are saying, I quite like the look of. I quite like. It's a Detroit running back, but I do actually like Williams this week. And I know we had a chat with a couple of friends earlier about this as to why. I just think he's a cheap running back at 15 million. Swift's absence means he's going to get the majority of the work there. Even when Swift has been there this season, Jamal Williams has still been involved in their offense. I think what people forget is Detroit are awful. We know that. Jared Goff is the quarterback there, and Jared Goff loves little dump off passes, little 3, 4, 5 yard gains. It's like a limit to his capabilities almost without putting him down too much. And the thing is with Williams is he does contribute in both elements of the offense. He's not a bad pass catching running back. He's a decent enough running back anyway. He was fairly productive in his limited opportunities that he had in Green Bay behind Aaron Jones. And whenever Aaron Jones was out, Jamal Williams stepped in, and he's had some decent fantasy games over the years. So I don't hate that at 15. And you look across Detroit's team, and there just isn't really much else. There's Hawkinson, and the receiver position is like a graveyard of nobody's this season. There's just no one's made an impact at receiver for them. The production has come completely from mainly Swift and Hawkinson. There's nothing really else there. And I think the Vikings are a team that you can run on. And they do give up touchdowns to pass catching backs as well. So I think he'll just be heavily involved, Mark. And I think at 15, it's not a bad shout. I don't think many will gravitate to him because he plays for the Lions and he's coming up against a fairly hot team in the Vikings who need to win games now. But I think 15 is certainly, if you were looking to go big elsewhere or you want one big pricey running back and one cheap running back, I think he's certainly a good complementary second back and not a badly priced third running back if that's the route you're going down. But there's some obvious ones, like you said, Mixon, Fournette. Falcons have given up the 4th most points in the last month or so to running back. So there's a lot of cases to be made there for this running back position this week. There's a lot of good matchups amongst it.
Yeah, I think Mattison is another great play because he just does the Dalvin Cook role when he plays. But I mean, down towards the bottom there, Gibson, Mitchell, Williams, like you say, and Barkley as well. To be perfectly honest, I would happily take 3 out of 4 of those and spend up at other positions because I think they're all in great situations and great matchups. I just want to briefly talk about Gibson though. I think, and this will be probably my favorite mini stack of the season so far, is Antonio Gibson and Deshaun Jackson, a wide receiver from the Raiders. Now I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it's because I just think I wouldn't play Deshaun Jackson without him being in some sort of stack because he's 7 million and he's very variable. But I think it's got to be one of my favorite stacks of the year because just the way the matchups work. Deshaun Jackson has the revenge narrative going, which is always worth some fantasy points, isn't it? And Washington are the worst team against the long pass and stuff. And the Seahawks even proved that last week when it was only on that final drive they actually started doing anything, and that was through the long ball. So I just think I really like Gibson this week, and I really like him with Deshaun Jackson. I think once you pick those two, you can kind of do anything, any other position. I think you can then pay up for like a Jonathan Taylor, etc.
Yeah.
But I like Eli Mitchell as well. I mean, he is the RB1 in San Francisco. I know Jermichael Hasty might be coming back, but I'm not that worried about that. And I just find Saquon at 15.4 million down here, it just doesn't feel right to me. It just feels like he's too cheap. I know he's not really done much since he's been back, but I just think he's too cheap. Basically, that's what it comes down to.
Do you feel like getting burned again with Miles Sanders at 11.1 this week if he's good to go, Mark?
I was all on the Brandon Scott train, and then Miles Sanders today has said that he's going to be playing. Brandon, is it Brandon?
Boston Scott.
Yeah. Sorry, it's Boston. Yeah, I was all ready to back him because as the best sort of value play. But no, if Sanders is back, then I wouldn't play because you've got Hurts, Sanders, and Scott basically to share the load. But Scott seems to always get the red zone work. It seems like, doesn't it? He seems to get the touchdowns. So yeah, isn't there some doubt about Darrell Henderson's availability this week?
I think from what I've read thus far, his doubt is more precautionary. I think he sat out practice yesterday, but I think it was more just a precaution. I think they're fully expecting him to suit up and play.
Okay, so that's another one. And also, a very popular play fantasy-wise the last few weeks has been Myles Gaskin, and he's on the second page as well, which possibly is a bit unfair with the last couple of weeks. So yeah, I think there's plenty. I don't think you need to necessarily come down here. I mean, I wouldn't choose a Seattle running back. They're so desperate they've signed Adrian Peterson. So
no, I agree with you though, Mark. Like, even like Josh Jacobs, we've not mentioned Josh Jacobs, but he had a steadily good game against Dallas on Thanksgiving. So I think even he's in with contention because I think when they get on the goal line, they just go to Jacobs. Jacobs is the goal line back, and whenever they're sort of 2-3 yards out, it's gonna go to Jacobs.
I feel this could be a 3 running back week because there's such good value there with Gibson, Mitchell, Barkley, Jacobs, and Williams.
Feels like that. I think this week you can go big, and then you can go 2 budget backs, and build 3 wide receiver, 3 running back stable.
Yeah. So I think we probably agreed here. Should we put Jamal Williams in as one of them? Because
we'll go with Williams, and
I would put a vote for Gibson myself, but
yeah, no, I'm happy to throw Gibson in for the time being, and then we'll see what we're left with budget wise. We might be able to come back and go big at running back, and in which case, if we can, then we could look at a Mixon, a Fournette, or a Mattison.
Yeah, indeed. So on to wide receiver. Look at Cooper Kupp's price, 23.3 million, 4 million more than the second place Justin Jefferson, which is just
that's crazy.
It's reflective of how dominant he's been now. And also, I'm fully expecting the Rams to absolutely destroy the Jaguars this week. I know the Rams have been on a bit of a downward slide, but they're at home. It's the Jags. I think I can see this easily being one of those 42-10 games.
Yeah. If they don't rip the Jags a new one this week, I might as well just turn the season in for the Rams. I think that season done. 3 losses. They have to win this week. It has to be a convincing win. So yeah, I can see the justification for the price. With that said, Odell, Van Jefferson are down there at 13.7 and 12.9. I don't. That Van Jefferson price is quite interesting. He had some big plays the other week. So,
is that your favorite? Is that who you prefer out of the 2 of them?
I don't know because Odell was a little bit banged up. He had a back issue, so I don't know. That's something to monitor. But I think if we get a lead, this could be one of them games where we just sort of like pound the ball down the Jags' throat anyway, and really go Henderson and Michelle heavy. But yeah, receiver. There's some good options this week. Mentioned McLaurin before, Mark. I think he's reasonably priced for the matchup there. 15.7, I think, is still fairly cheap for what you could get out of him potential wise. I think
He's been a bit
Pittman.
up and down though. He's fantasy wise, he's always a good player from from an NFL point of view. But fantasy wise, definitely had some. He's definitely
Oh,
got a low floor.
he's got a low floor where if
Mm.
he's going to have a low game, you're going to get a 6 or a 7 out of him.
Mm.
If he's going to have a good game, you're going to get 20 plus out of him. And I think if you're going to play McLaurin, I think you've just got to accept that you're going to get one or the other, probably nothing in between.
Yeah,
I like Pittman this week. I think
we need to put him in, don't we?
if we're going with Wentz, I think Pittman has to
Everyone
go in
needs to
there.
go.
He feels far too
Yeah.
cheap at 14.5.
Yes. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. Yeah, I agree. I also like Ayuk down there as well.
Yeah, I love
Especially with
that this
Debo
week.
being out.
I've actually got Ayuk on my obvious picks this week
Yeah,
because Debo's out, and in
yeah.
recent weeks as well. I know Ayuk had a slow start to the season, but he's really come good in recent weeks. He looks like the receiver that he looked like last season. That he was ready to sort of take up the reins and be wide receiver number one in San Francisco. But yeah, he's coming too, and I think Debo being out, is he too obvious a play? I don't know.
Mm.
There is value there with some of the other San Francisco
Yeah.
receivers, but I just don't think there's reliability with the value. So again, it could be high ceiling, low floor with some of them, but they are cheap. But Brandon Ayuk 15.2, I think, is a good play.
I think we should just put him in now. To be honest, I think we both agree on him. And I
Yeah,
think we spend it. The thing about San Francisco and the other receivers, I'm actually tempted. We'll talk about this tight end. To think Kittle gets a boost with Debo Samuel being out,
yeah,
rather than some sort of player moving up the depth chart and stuff. So
yeah. I mean, so some of these in the receivers for San Francisco, I know the appeal might be there for the likes of Juwan Jennings and Sherfield and people like that, but they've been anonymous for weeks and weeks and weeks. So yeah, I think Brandon Ayuk's an obvious there.
and his history shows us that when there's an injured wide receiver, it's not often that another wide receiver replaces them.
Yes.
So yeah, So whereas with running backs, you can back up running backs like Madison, for example. They can get a full workload and be as productive. Wide receivers, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I quite like Smith's price this week as well. I get the thing with Smith is he can be a bit touchdown dependent, but
Where is he?
he does feel quite cheap given he's coming up against the Jets. He's 13.9, and the only thing with Smith is he is a bit touchdown dependent. That is the only thing with him.
And yeah, they're so run heavy. They become more and more run heavy as well as the season's going on in Philadelphia. So
yeah,
that's always the downside. I mean, it'd be a great play if I think the fields are bigger in these contests on FanTeam. I think it's a great play. But because they're relatively small, like under 1,000, I don't think you necessarily have to be that wacky with your lineups.
Yeah.
You see, T Higgins is down here on the second page as well, and that'll be matchup based because of the Chargers and what they've done. You obviously run against the Chargers, but he's been pretty good since he came back, pretty consistent.
Back on the T Higgins hype. You've got Mike Williams down there as well at 13.1. It's quite a stacked second page. This actually, Brandon Cooks finds his way onto his second page this week. Yeah.
And he's started off really well this season, but he's kind of gone downhill a bit and got a bit too inconsistent. And targets wise has been really really small. It's been reducing as the season goes on. So I don't think I don't think you necessarily want to run back from Houston in your stacks anyway.
Yeah.
No, obviously.
You've got as well. It's a tough matchup for them against Arizona, but Darnell Mooney's there at 12.5, and he gets all the work goes to him.
Yeah.
In the last few weeks, 16 targets he had against Baltimore, 8 against Detroit, 100+ yard receiving games in both of those games. He's had touchdowns recently. I think he's not a bad play at 12.5 because I think it's.
I agree.
It's a
He's a
game where
wide
the
receiver
Bears.
one on his team.
Yeah,
He's a
that's it.
12.5. So
Wide
there's
receiver
no.
one, no one
Yeah.
blocking his path because it looks
Mm,
like there's no Robinson yet again. Even when Robinson has played this season, he seems to. I don't know if he's out of favour or whether he's just not 100%. But Robinson's right down at 10.1. He's just not getting the looks at all, is he? It's strange situation for Robinson this season. But yeah, 12.5 for a wide receiver one who's getting the workload that he is, and given the matchup, you would assume they're going to have to throw the ball.
Yep, I think.
Crazy.
But I think with this lineup, we don't actually need to be on the second page anymore. We've got so much money left. I think we can choose from some of the bigger boys.
So if we're going big, then Mark, the question is, who do we go with?
Do we go all the way to Cup? Do we stay with Jefferson? Jefferson's just been so good, hasn't he?
I think for the difference in price, 4 million difference, I would go Jefferson.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And we'll come back to the fill-in, whether we go 4 or 3.
Yeah.
With the wide receiver running back later. So we'll move on to the tight end. And we've got George Kittle at the top, who I do actually like this week. Mark Andrews, and then Rob Gronkowski, who came back from injury as if he'd never been away.
Yeah. I looked
13 and then 19.
I looked, and the Falcons are actually a decent enough D against tight ends. But I think the thing with Gronk is he's not like a tight end, is he? He's like. I mean, he's huge. He throughout his career, he doesn't receive the ball like a tight end. I mean, he does, but like because of the workload that he gets, and because of that connection with Brady, he's essentially just a wide receiver one almost.
Yeah. A big, slow wide receiver one. But he seems to get
very
open.
big and very slow at this stage. Yeah, but
he just seems to get open.
He does. That's the thing, and because he is so big, like he's very difficult to cover a lot of the time. You know, he's coming up against linebackers, and linebackers can't really cover him.
No.
So yeah, I mean, some of the top guys this week, Kittle, Gronkowski, you know, I don't mind those plays. Oh dear me, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but TJ Hawkinson.
No, we're not doing it.
Yeah, we're doing it, Matt. We're going there.
We've got Williams already. Do we really want 2 Detroit Lions?
That is the thing, I suppose.
Unless you swap out Williams for some one of the other cheaper ones.
Yeah, I mean, if you were doing that, I would be inclined to maybe go Hawkinson this week, because the Vikings are one of the worst defenses against receivers, but and he is wide receiver one for the Lions. I actually like Jared Cook if you're going cheap at tight end. He is touchdown dependent. He doesn't tend to get a lot of targets, a lot of yards at this stage in his career, but the Bengals have given up 4 touchdowns in the last 5 weeks to tight ends even. So I think if you're going to go cheap there, I don't think he's a bad look. And I think Foster Moreau maybe as well if Darren Waller is out.
It looks like he's going to be out, doesn't it? So that game there is what he did last time he was out. He basically had exactly the same role. And then the other one who's really cheap like this is James O'Shaughnessy, who is the tight end one now for the Jags. If you really want to play a Jaguar, and that's kind of his ceiling there.
Yeah.
So, I don't think, but we don't need to, I don't think in his team go that cheap. I think we can kind of play.
How are we actually looking budget-wise here? 35.
We got 35, so we still got defense to play, which we could just put in now, to be honest with you, put in a cheap defense.
So to be fair, we could actually, I think, given the budget we've got left, we could actually go Kittle.
Yeah, I think so. Right. And then defense, which we never spend that much money on, do we, on a defense? So let's see who's good down here, cheap. At the Giants against Miami?
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad. Giants against Miami or possibly Bengals against Chargers, maybe.
Yeah. Generally the Bengals have been pretty good. They're coming off amazing couple of weeks, really. They're the form defense. I think we probably put them in.
Yeah.
So now we've got 13.8, so we'll go to all and affordable. And here you go. All those players, lots of those players we've just been talking about. So, like you say, Gronkowski is almost like having a wide receiver in there. I mean, he's down as a tight end. but you kind of have to get rid of that idea that he's a tight end on here. He's a wide receiver, effectively.
Yeah, and I think in recent weeks, actually, there's been some value in lineups that have been twin tight end. I know we said in the season long contest, Mark, earlier in the season that we didn't like twin tight end. Probably not in a season long, but week to week, if you're building this kind of lineup, then I think in certain situations like this, then twin tight end could actually be a good build and could set you apart a little bit from the pack.
So Mooney's still available to us as well, because we both like him as well.
As is Gaskin. This is a tough final piece. I mean,
for me, it would be Mooney just because he's a wide receiver one.
I'd be inclined to do that because I think, again, the mouths to feed in Tampa, and if they get a lead, it just become playoff Lenny kind of game again. In which case you'll be kicking yourself if you don't own Leonard Fournette. But I think Darnell Mooney, like you said, wide receiver one, a game where Chicago are going to have to throw the ball. Yeah, I don't mind that. I think he's priced well as well.
Yeah. So that is a team I would never build on my own. But maybe this is what we should be doing. We should do it. It's like, so we've got Carson Wentz at quarterback, Jamal Williams and Antonio Gibson at running back, Michael Pittman, Brandon Ayuk, Justin Jefferson, Darnell Mooney at wide receiver, George Kittle at tight end, and the Cincinnati defense. In actual fact, if you wanted to upgrade the Cincinnati defense, we've got 1.3 million. Which means we can pretty much choose any defense we wanted to.
In which case, I
think I like the 49ers the most out of these hires.
Yeah, the Seahawks just look off it, don't they? They look really off it.
Yeah. Are they really any better, though, than the Bengals, really, in this choice?
I think the Chargers are probably a more potent offense at this stage than the Seahawks have been recently. Seahawks just look putrid at the moment. So, I'd probably go the Niners.
So we've got 3 Niners in there. So we're kind of banking on a...
we've got a big Niners stack there. And that absolutely pains me because I do not like the Niners.
But, I know, and I feel like now we've got Ayuk and Kittle. We should really have Garoppolo there. But anyway, we're going to stick with it because we've run out of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've gone over an hour. So that's the lineup. So there you go. So we'll be entering that into one of the monsters this week. I'm sorry, Red Zone contest this week. So that's it. So remember to check out the Red Zone Sunday Redzone contest on FanTeam. Check out Dream Sport, like we said at the beginning. Definitely worthwhile. And don't forget to do your season-long teams before tonight's deadline.
Yes, the lock is tonight. Yeah. What I would say as well is if you are entering the Red Zone, it's always worth as well. The contest isn't live yet, but I'm sure it will be on Sunday. There is a 9 o'clock Sunday fumble, which is just the 9 o'clock slate games, and I think the late kickoff, the midnight / 1 o'clock game, whatever time it kicks off. Usually that goes live on a Saturday or Sunday as well. So I would urge anyone to enter that as well, because I've actually had some success in that when I haven't in the Red Zone contests. It's usually a smaller pool of players to pick from, not as much variance, but it's sometimes that's easier to pick a winning lineup because you're just not coming up against as many odds, so to speak. So yeah, keep eyes out for that as well. And just remember, when you do build your lineups, as I've started saying each week, Mark, the catches are for show and touchdowns are for dough. And just remember that when you do build your lineups. Any parting comments from you, Mark?
No, you said it all there. I can't beat that. I really can't. Anyway,
be beaten. It cannot be beaten.
Let's have a great weekend, everybody, and see you at the top of the leaderboards.
Yeah, we'll catch you next week.